To you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.
Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson, and it's my pleasure to have with us tonight Dr. Dennis Ashley, who's been on our show several times before. Is that correct, Dennis?
That's correct. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. Now, Dennis is a man of many talents and virtues, but one hat you wear, Dennis, is you're the chairman of the Trauma Commission. Is that correct? The Georgia Trauma Commission?
That's right.
And maybe we can discuss a little bit about how things are going. I think many of our viewers can remember there was a lot of, attention focused on a constitutional amendment to fund the Trauma Commission and with car tax sales, and unfortunately that did not pass. But nevertheless, the Trauma Commission is going forward, and maybe you could discuss some of what the situation is now.
Sure, I'll be happy to. You know, our only source of funding now is the super speeder, which is picking up speed, if I might say that. Little pun intended.
Well, okay, all right, yes.
But it's up to about $16 million now.
Yes.
And you were on the Trauma Commission
yes.
and put in your years of service there, and we were just getting started and had no funding. It really brought in about $3 or $4 million that first year, but now we're up to projections of about $16 million. So that's good news. We at least have a start.
Well, why don't you discuss what the super speeder ticket arrangement is? I mean, maybe this will be a cautionary tale for some of our viewers that might be tempted to go a little too fast down the highway. What happens? What is that exactly?
Sure. Well, if you're going over 75 on a two-lane road or over 85 on the interstate, there's an additional $200 fine on your base ticket.
Yes.
And that $200 goes to the state funds for trauma care.
Yes. Well, actually, so there are funds available, and maybe we can talk about how those funds are being expended. I mean, obviously, we're trying to create something in Georgia that's of great consequence to its citizens, and many people are pulling oars in the boat to make that happen. And what are some things that are going on now?
Well, the first thing we did was try to. It's hard to organize a state trauma system, you know.
There are not so many out there either, are there?
No, there's no perfect system in the United States.
Yes.
So we took pieces, you know, when you were on the commission as well, and looked at different states.
Yes.
And what we've come up with now is breaking the state down into 10 regions, which are the EMS regions.
Yes.
And letting each region form their own special trauma committee, which is we call RTACs, Regional Trauma Advisory Committees.
Yes.
And once they form those, then EMS, surgeons, docs, hospitals, trauma centers, non-trauma centers all come to the table and use the CDC guidelines, which identifies the most critically injured patient that we all agree on that's really bad, and helps us get that patient to the right place at the right time. And all that is tied together by the Trauma Communication Center. We actually have a communication center in Forsyth, Georgia now that can field calls from all over the state and actually ties all the trauma centers together. So in a moment's notice, I can tell you from that center what services are available, what docs are available, and that's really something unique for Georgia.
And so really in the past, a tragic situation might be that if someone was in the wilds of South Georgia, shall we say, and maybe there was a hunting accident or some kind of substantial traumatic event occurred, and the trauma victim went to a local hospital, a small local hospital, there would be a lot of, it would be quite difficult to get that patient to go where it needed to go. And now the system is taking care of that shortfall. Is that right? Or just discuss that. What happens? Who does the person call? How does that work?
That's right. Now we try to identify the critically injured patient at the scene. The paramedics are tied into the communication center.
Statewide, right?
Well, we're not quite statewide yet. We have the capability to do that.
And that's the objective.
But right now, Region 5, which is the Macon region. Region 6, which is the Augusta region. The paramedics have been trained, the hospitals are on board, the
Yes.
communication center is tied in, and we're fielding calls. We've taken about 100 calls now since the end of
Wow,
January
wow.
when we just started. And you know, we're just in March, so this is really cutting edge. We just started with 100 calls.
Yes.
And we have the other regions, Region 1, which is North
Yes,
Georgia,
yes, yes.
and Region 9, which is
Yes,
Savannah.
yes.
They are in the process of forming their RTACs.
Yes.
They're not online yet, but they're writing
Yes.
their plan. So already, we thought we'd only have one region
Yes.
in a year.
Yes.
We've already got 2 online and 2 anxious to come online.
Yes. Now, this is a good story, I think, having participated in it somewhat. This is an example of local initiative, local patients and doctors and healthcare providers getting together and trying to come up with some ideas to make things better. And it sort of brings back the idea that we live in a republic. We have lots of different states that have different ways of doing things, and each of the states can come up with ways to make things work, and then the other states can emulate that. I mean, is that right? I mean, this is really quite a good, I guess, innovative set of procedures that would not be easily done with a unitary national healthcare system. Is that fair to say?
Even not only that at the national level, but break it down to state level. We've
Yes.
even broken it down into regions
Yes,
in the
yes,
state.
yes.
One cookie cutter healthcare system
Yes.
for Georgia won't work for trauma.
Yes.
We've allowed each region to
Yes,
develop their own
yes.
nuances, if you will, and come up with their plan.
Yes.
That's what's so nice about the system.
So I wonder, just to ask this question, do you have any thoughts about what the impact will or would be on this system in 2014 when I guess the affordable, is it the Affordable Health Care Act?
I think that's
That's the name, right? When that is instituted, what might be the impact? Do you have any thoughts about that? Have you considered it? Or?
Well, I think everybody's asking that question. I just returned from the National Committee on Trauma, which is a conglomeration of trauma services
Yes.
around the country.
Now,
Every
incidentally,
state's
you're a
represented.
big poopah too, Dennis. So I'll give you some. I think that's great. I mean, you're really making some nice contributions on a national and international basis. So what was said?
Well, basically, I think nobody has the answer to that question because the bill is 2,000 or 3,000 pages long, and we don't really know how it's going to affect the states. A lot of the funding from that bill is from the federal government up front, at least the way I understand it, and then a lot of the cost is shifted to the states. So as you know, and you were just at the Capitol testifying that we needed more trauma funding from the
Yes,
state to
yes,
make our system work,
yes.
which we're on our way. We're
Yes,
developing something.
yes.
If the state has to take over federal mandates and fund those,
Yes.
will we be able to get our trauma money
Yes.
from our legislators?
Yes.
Because they're shifting money into the other health care. So it gets very complicated.
So I guess what really is going on here in a way, I mean, we've sort of talked about this before, is one of the things happening, as my understanding, is the Medicaid enrollment in the state is going to enormously increase because of the
Right.
nuances. And so many people will be put on Medicaid in the state and the state will be required to pay for their medical expenses. It will soak a tremendous amount of state revenue into this Medicaid obligation. And all the other healthcare entities could well see their funding taken away. And not only healthcare entities, but also educational institutions, social services. It could be a tremendous governmental crisis in Atlanta under the Golden Dome if other funds aren't found to support the new requirements that the law is mandating for the state. Well, Dennis, you're saving a lot of lives too here. Is that the idea? I mean, to get these people where they need to go, get these victims to the right place. And I noticed some helicopters fly around too. Is that? I've seen some arrive at least in Macon, but what's all that about? Helicopters and.
Well, recently, in the last couple of years, we actually have guidelines now for helicopters. They're actually licensed through the state of Georgia,
Yes.
which that was something that took a few years to get through.
Yes.
So that was a nice thing that happened in the EMS over the last couple of years. We also have some helicopters that are stationed in South Georgia now.
Yes.
There's about 3 or 4 helicopters across that zone.
Yes.
And that has allowed, with the new heliport that was built
Right,
on our
yes,
roof
yes,
at our trauma
yeah,
center,
yes.
has really opened up South Georgia to access. So
Yes.
we're getting those patients quicker.
Yes.
And we've asked the communication center to actually work with the helicopter services so that they actually know where the helicopters are at all times.
Wow, that's great.
So that when those paramedics and field generals on the ground call from the scene and say they need a helicopter, they can get assistance
Yes.
from the communications center and know where these helicopters are.
Yes.
We don't have that worked out yet, but there's discussions
Yes,
taking place
yes.
between the TCC or the communications center
yes.
and the helicopter services.
Yes. So maybe we can talk about why it's so important to get people to an appropriate trauma center quickly. And one can imagine a situation where it's deer hunting season and someone is up in their deer stand and maybe they're consumed a little alcoholic beverage and they accidentally topple out. They fall down and they've sustained terrible injuries and they go to a small country hospital. Why is it so important they get where they need to go quickly?
Well, you've heard about the golden hour.
That's a little softball for you to hit. Yes, I've heard of it. Maybe you
You've
can
heard
discuss.
about the
I've heard of it.
golden
Yes, maybe you can discuss that.
And so
I threw you a
basically,
softball.
if we can get that patient that is bleeding within an hour, and there's nothing magical about 59 minutes versus 60 minutes.
Yes.
But you get the idea. Somewhere within that first hour, we have a
Yes.
better chance of saving their life.
Yes.
So once the injury starts,
Yes.
the quicker they get to what we call definitive care
Yes.
at the trauma center,
Yes.
the better their outcome is.
Yes. We see the same thing in neurosurgery, may I say, when oftentimes people have a substantial head injury and there's a rather sort of famous problem called an epidural hematoma, and often we have to go very quickly and get those patients to the operating room. And if there's just a small delay, they won't make it, and if we can get there in time, we can save them. So the speed of getting people where they need to go is important. Is that correct?
That's right.
And well, let's see. What are some plans in the future for the Trauma Commission? What are you guys up to? I know you have retreats, and what are some things you're thinking about, and if there was enough money?
If there were enough money. Well, we just had our retreat in Rome, Georgia. And,
Well, that doesn't sound too exotic. So
Well,
you didn't go crazy.
we didn't go crazy.
You went to Rome, Georgia. Okay.
Rome, Georgia, and the facility was actually free.
Good. No tax
Mr.
paid.
Kurt Stunkel, the
Oh,
CEO
I see.
at Rome,
He
was
paid
kind
for it.
enough
Okay, you
to
didn't have
let us
to.
use his facility.
I see. Good.
So we had a nice retreat, and we really worked on our strategic plan, where we want to be over the next 3 years.
Yes.
And really what the commission really focused on was outcomes.
Yes.
How can we show that we're making a difference with the taxpayers' dollars
Yes.
by instituting all these things that we're doing?
Yes.
So what we've started to do, we're working with some national experts.
Yes.
We've contacted Johns Hopkins.
Yes.
We've got some researchers there we're talking to.
Yes.
We've talked to University of Toronto, some researchers
yes.
there. And we're actually trying to decide what metrics we need to set up to study. What data points do we need to capture to show that 3 years from now that we've made a
Yes,
difference
yes.
in our system to the
Yes,
citizens
yes,
of Georgia.
yes.
And those folks, those experts that have done this across the
Yes,
country
yes.
are helping us put our methodology
Right,
together
right.
to actually study our own system.
Yes.
And ultimately, that's what the legislators will want to know.
Yeah, one of the things that to me, the trauma system is a good paradigm for emergency care in general. I mean, one could imagine a situation, once the structure is there, where you have the call center, it could relatively easily be used for other organ system problems. I mean, you could have, I guess, OBGYN emergencies or cardiovascular problems or strokes. All of those things really potentially could be thread through the same matrix. And so by putting the system in place, emergency care could really be put in a rational fashion all across the state, could it not? I mean, that's possible.
That's exactly right. As you
Yes.
notice, the helicopter flies and lands on our pad, and everyone
Yes.
just assumes it's a trauma patient.
Yes.
A lot of times I never get called
Yes.
because it's not a trauma patient.
Oh, I see.
It's
Yes.
OB, it's
Yes,
neonatal.
yes.
It's
Right.
the folks using it now really a lot are the
Right.
cardiac patients.
Right.
You know, there's a big push to get that patient with a heart attack from
Absolutely.
the scene in the cath lab immediately, and they're flying them in here and they're cutting down their times dramatically.
And so I think that's a big point, and I just might suggest that one of the things in looking at it's not merely trauma that's being helped by putting this kind of system in place, but all kinds of emergencies have the advantage of this system potentially, and it could be a big advantage. Now, one of the things too that I think the system possibly could be useful would be telemedicine. I mean, the idea is that maybe you could have a system in place ultimately where if you're in a small hospital, there could be some kind of telemedicine that quickly went to a center to make some kind of judgment about the treatment or what needed to happen. Do you have any comments about that? I know you're thinking about it.
Well, we've tried that some, we've experimented some. It's still in its infancy. It's not telemedicine. I
Yes.
mean, telemedicine's widespread,
Right,
but
yes.
teletrauma is really
Yes.
still trying to find its niche.
Yes.
We haven't quite figured that out yet.
Yes.
We've had some tries at first that
Yes.
haven't really been
Yes.
as successful as we
Yes.
thought, as
Right,
people
yes.
didn't seem to be as interested in
Yes,
this
it's
as
a
we thought.
complicated story, isn't it? But one could imagine the system in the future where things could go a little quicker. Now, how about sort of resuscitation, or what's going on in, I guess, the EMTs when they pick patients up? And that's a potential, thing that could happen, is some more intensive, interchange in the ambulance coming to the hospital, or any thoughts about that? I mean, relaying.
There are some, now in the ambulances here in Macon, Georgia.
Yes.
They have I forget the name of the technology, but basically they can read the EKG, do it, and
Yes.
send it into the ER,
Right.
and the ER physician can decide if it's the appropriate kind of
Yes,
heart attack
yes,
that needs
yes,
the cath lab.
yes.
So really, the cath lab can be notified
Yes.
to get ready before the patient even arrives. That's the exciting kind of
Yes,
technology
yes,
that
yes.
you're talking
Right,
about
right.
with telecommunications or telemedicine.
So, I mean, in looking at the future, what we want to try and do is to perfect our healthcare system and get something that will actually be of assistance for everyone. And a lot of this is, there's not any kind of magic, unitary way to do it. We have to try and figure things out. People of goodwill need to be collaborating and trying to make it work, as we're doing here. And just to go back to the idea of what might happen in 2014, it's a little spooky, isn't it? That the power that would be aggregated in Washington and in the Hall of the Healthcare, the decisions that we're not quite sure about the right thing to do, we're experimenting a little bit. I'm concerned there might be some kind of draconian, kibosh put on the whole system, or some kind of rule or legislation is just mandated. It's mandated that this particular kind of treatment happen or not happen. People might say, well, you're getting some good ideas down in Georgia, but that's just too bad. I mean, do you have any thoughts about that? I mean, you have a concern that treatment modalities might be directed centrally, that it might be an error?
Well, again, we're finding out in our state we can't have a state trauma run system where one system fits the entire state.
Yes, yes.
Atlanta's different than
Yes,
South Georgia.
yes, yes.
And so if you take that up to the national level, I can't imagine that one plan will
Yes.
service all 50
Yes,
states.
yes,
There
yes.
has to be still some state control.
Yes. Now, one of the questions, or at least I can recollect considering, is the transfer back to a smaller institution. So the patient has a pretty big smash up in a small town, goes to a small hospital, is medevaced to the big center, treated and stabilized. Is there a mechanism to get that patient back to where the patient needs to go? There's some difficulties in that, isn't there?
There is, and there's not a good way to do that. We do have trouble getting folks back to their community hospital for their convalescence. And we try, sometimes we're successful, but there's usually a big delay.
What do you suppose the reason is, Dennis? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I do have a thought on that.
This little softball.
As we deal with every day. It has to do with insurance and who's going to pay, and,
Yes.
and Medicare
Yes.
and Medicaid, and they only want to pay one facility.
Yes.
So whoever gets the patient last,
Yes.
if I understand it correctly,
Right.
tends to get paid.
Now, if I could just make this comment, this is a public comment, and I think that the people of the state just need to understand this. This is a government regulation that's preventing the transfer of the patient. A patient that could go back to their small institution, and that would be a tremendous step forward in efficiency. So the patient can stabilize, can go home, be near his family, recover there, and the real tertiary care resources can be devoted for fresh patients. And so we can have increased medical efficiency and drop costs and make everyone's insurance premiums go down. But we're being, sandbagged by government regulations that only will pay one hospital. So if that hospital were to send the patient back, or only one hospital is going to be paid, so somebody's going to be out of luck. So the administrators are not going to allow that to take place, even though this is, to me, I rarely use such a word, but shall I say stupid? I mean, it's just not too rational, is it? Is that
Well,
fair?
That's fair, and it's the loser is the patient because, families are displaced when
Yes,
they come
yes.
many miles to the trauma center, and if they could get back home, these families are staying in hotel
Yes,
rooms,
yes,
and really,
yes.
they could go back home if we could just work
Yes.
out the logistics of the insurance.
And so this is something, I mean, these are the problems that bedevil the American healthcare system. Right now they're there. And there needs to be a substantial effort to try and make things more efficient, more rational, and I'm concerned that things may go the other way. I mean, every day we encounter the inefficiencies the system has in place. I'm just concerned about what might happen in 2014. And
I agree.
And I know you are. Well, Dennis, on a lighter note, now has Kentucky won the national basketball championship now, or is it a few more
Well,
days?
as a matter of fact, they're in the Sweet 16. I have tickets. I'll be there Friday night in the Georgia Dome.
Are you
cheering them on.
really going to go see Kentucky?
Oh, absolutely.
They haven't quite won yet, have they?
Not yet.
Okay.
But they have several banners hanging in Rupp Arena.
Oh, is that right?
So they've
right
won it
now,
many years.
you're a Kentucky boy, is that right? Is
I
that
grew up in Kentucky and went to medical school at University of Kentucky.
Oh, good. So that's your alma mater, and their football team's not quite as good, is it?
Well, no, we have to pick a different team to cheer for during football season.
Let's see. Well, okay, the Bulldogs are around if you need a team to root for. Well, just looking at talking, one more comment about trauma here, back to our trauma conversation. You're a trauma surgeon. What exactly is a trauma surgeon? I mean, what is that? I mean, what's the difference between a trauma surgeon and another type of surgeon?
Well, a trauma surgeon typically is a general surgery trained surgeon
Yes.
that has spent extra time, fellowship trained in trauma and critical
Yes,
care.
yes.
That really takes care of traumatic injuries
Yes.
and patients in the ICU.
Yes.
Working with the neurosurgeons and
Yes.
working with the orthopedic
Yes,
surgeons,
yes.
as usually our patients have
Yes.
brain trauma and
Well, they have
bone
multiple
injuries
system,
as well.
right?
It's
Multiple system
trauma.
problems, yes. And so, do you get some special training to do that? I mean, I think you did you
Yes,
not?
I did 2 years worth of fellowship after the general surgery residency.
Yes. And where was that? Were you?
That was actually, I did my general surgery at the medical center.
I can
in
remember
Macon.
that. I believe you
remember
were
that?
one of my students earlier.
Yeah, you're telling your age now.
Well, that's one of my smarter students too. Much smarter than me, may I say.
And then trauma fellowship at Grady, and then critical care at University of Pittsburgh.
Yes. So there's in looking after these sick patients, it's very complicated, isn't it? I mean,
Right.
all the organ systems are injured, and they're all in some state of distress, and balancing the number is a very complicated thing to do, isn't it?
That's exactly right.
So that's why a really badly injured patient with multiple trauma really needs to be in a center that can look after them. Is that right? And the outcomes are better.
That's right. And there's a study out in the New England Journal of Medicine from a few years ago that actually looked at that trauma center versus non-trauma center across the country,
Yes,
hospitals
yes,
matched.
yes,
25% reduction in mortality if those critically ill patients
Yes,
were treated
yes.
at a trauma center.
yes.
That's pretty significant, 25%.
Yes, that is a good number. Now, let's see, Dennis. What about artificial blood? Any comments about? I mean, one of the problems that we have, and we've had the American Red Cross people on to discuss blood donation. That's a really good thing. But any progress on artificial blood, which I know the trauma surgeons would like to have? Any comments?
Well, that's been the holy grail. There's been several studies that
Yes.
have looked at over the last 15, 20 years. We actually participated, the
Yes,
medical center
yes.
did, in one of the largest studies known a few years ago
Yes.
with 30 trauma centers across the
Yes,
country,
yes,
giving patients blood, randomizing them at the scene.
yes, yes.
And our results were good at the medical center.
Yes.
We had good results with the patients we treated.
Yes.
But when you pooled all the data, which I think was about 1,200
yes,
patients,
yes.
the FDA thought that there was a small
Yes,
risk
yes.
of heart attack
Yes,
and that
yes.
it was a little bit risky, and so they didn't approve the artificial blood.
Yes.
So right now, that's been the last great trial
Yes.
that we've had, and we'll just have to wait
So
and see.
you have to really depend on blood donation, do you not? I mean,
Absolutely, that's all we have.
So everybody that's out there that donates, I mean, they're really doing a noble thing and there's some really wonderful people that just go every 59 days or whatever the number is, and I think that's it, 57 maybe.
That's right.
And they give blood. That's really, so those people are very very wonderful people for our patients.
Those people are heroes for our patients. You're right.
Well, Dennis, what do you see on the future? I mean, just as you look out, I mean, what's the situation going to be like with trauma in our state in 10 years? And when they fall out of when people, as they always do, fall out of deer stands or have some misadventure, what are we going to do to really that'll be better in 10 years to be able to look after them?
Well, I think our prevention efforts are getting better as we reach out and become more organized to hopefully keep that gentleman or
Yes.
lady out of the deer stand
Yes.
that may, on a bad day, may fall
Right,
out.
right.
Cars are getting better as we work with the manufacturers.
Yes.
Some of the interesting things about vehicles now, you may not realize it, but your vehicle has electronic equipment in it. You may have heard of OnStar and some other brands
Yes.
that actually can feed data into the communication center about your velocity and when you crash and when the airbag goes off. So it may be possible in the near future, and some of
Yes,
this is happening
right.
now in certain
Yes,
areas.
yes.
that we can actually know when you have a wreck
Yes.
before anybody at the
Yes,
scene
yes,
calls for an
yes,
ambulance.
yes.
That'd be great data to have
Yes.
as we become more organized, because it ties back into that time factor.
Yes,
If we can get you and send an ambulance while you're unconscious,
yes.
well, then we get to you quicker.
Well, Dennis, I think let me congratulate you on the great work that you're doing and the Trauma Commission is doing. And, I really think the citizens in Georgia need to feel like the money that goes to you to help your commission is being well spent. And I encourage you to keep up the good work and come back and talk to us again. And it's been a real pleasure having you with us tonight.
Thanks.
So thanks for
Enjoyed
coming.
it.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Thank you.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.